And then when you do that, please try to mention which agency funded your SBIR, what phase you've been at successfully, and if there's any particular nuances about difficulties, good things, things you want to convey. So we'll give each of you maybe 5 minutes or so, and then I'm going to ask some specific questions. And after each person gives their introduction, I invite us to have a discussion about it. So we don't need to wait till the end for questions after they give their quick intro. If you have questions along the way, whether you're online or you're here in the room, go ahead, raise your hand, and somebody will bring over a mic to you, and we'll try to have the discussion along as we go. So first we have Elon Freedy, thank you. That's going to be talking about Perceptronics solutions. So go ahead.
So Perceptronics Solutions, we've been working with SBIR for about 18 years now. We've won a number of topics, from various agencies: Navy, Army, DARPA, Air Force. Most recently, we're doing one for SCO. Our company focuses on AI and data science, taking techniques out of academia. We do work with a lot of research partners in academia, and solving problems related to autonomy, decision support, human interaction. So the types of programs we've been going after have been kind of more from the S&T community than things that are directly to the acquisition community. I think we've sort of seen the program change over the years. Certainly transition's always been a challenge, particularly when you're working on sort of very S&T oriented topics. So like, for example, we started working on autonomy, say, 15 years ago. And at the time, there weren't a lot of acquisition programs that were doing things with autonomy. There wasn't a lot of commercial application for it either. I mean, now we're starting to see sort of fruits there, and there's a lot of programs like Future Vertical Lift, the Optionally Manned Fighting Vehicle, and other programs across the services where autonomy is now being applied in acquisition programs, and we're finding partnerships and places to stick our capabilities in. But I think that's kind of been the challenge over the years is find those transition opportunities. And a lot of times you find that the scientific and research community are sometimes operating on different time horizons from the acquisition community, where the scientific community is trying to think of the problems that are going to be necessary 10 years out, and what is the future force going to need, where the acquisition community is kind of more focused on more immediate problems. So there's sort of a balance that you need to find there in terms of how do you kind of work on things that are anticipating needs and futuristic capabilities, but also finding things that there is going to be somebody who has a pain point today that needs to be addressed, and is going to be able to fund a transition for you. Yeah, so I mean, I'm happy to take any specific questions, but that's kind of a good overview of our company and our experience.
Well, why don't we go to Kevin and give us a review, and we'll come back around for questions. Just one clarification. I know there's a lot of people new to government. When he's saying SCO, that's Strategic Capabilities Office, which is an office of OSD, which funds a very large number of SBIRs and STTRs. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Dr. Starr. So we're a relatively young company. We're probably younger than your oldest SBIR. So we started in 2011 as an organization. Our focus has always been digital transformation, digital engineering, model-based systems engineering, and cybersecurity analytics, and the cloud infrastructure development that kind of ties all that together. So we work closely with NAVC, with NAVOR. We have several SBIRs now through the Air Force. Our focus has always been on tactical systems. So we've kind of filled a niche, since 2011, in helping the tactical system community within the Navy and the Air Force make the transition from prime contract design, development, integration into a model-based systems engineering environment. So transitioning their design, their test, their agile processes, how they deliver and how they sustain, and do things like reliability, prediction curve analysis, and things like that into a fully automated engineering environment. And we realized, kind of starting in probably the 20, and I mentioned this not to kind of tout G2 Ops, but in 2014, we won the award for the Navy's Navy Acquisition Excellence. It was for model-based systems engineering. So think about that. That was 2014. So 2022, digital transformation, digital engineering, MBC are very much still in the conversation. Organizations are trying to figure out how to transition into these new environments and deal with automation, digital design environments and things like that. So we realized that, 2014, I'd say up to like 2018, we were doing, I'll call little I innovation. So we were building software code, developing plugins, and scripting environments tailored to our customers' needs. And they were filling gaps. They were helping them transition faster. We were helping them, cross analytical boundaries that they were, kind of bumping up against. And I looked at the SBIR, process, and I said, well, let's move into big I innovation. Let's take some of this foundation that we've built and try and put it into this kind of formal structure and deliver it maybe to a wider audience. So it was in 2018 that we, competed for and won our first SBIR. And that phase 1 is now a phase 3. It's one of 2 phase 3s we have with the Navy. It was awarded via the GSA assisted acquisition program, actually, which is just kind of a newish program. So we have multiple phase 1s, multiple phase 2s. We have another phase 3 working through the Aegis program office, actually, to help continue their digital engineering transformation, helping them do cyber analytics as they do baseline build and transition. So I think we made that transition very quickly, I would say. We've been lucky in some ways. The hard work definitely comes in. And I would say the transition from phase 1 to phase 2 is a lot about customer connection. Phase 2 to phase 3 is a lot of really, really hard work, collaboration, and kind of identifying the right long-term kind of life cycle support structure to make that work. And I think I'm sure we'll talk more about that as we go along, but that's one of the more difficult parts of this transition. We're a success story, but I think that's because we worked really, really hard to make that so, to kind of bring the innovations, to the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about ETC International?
Fantastic, thank you. I'm Chris Just. I'm the CEO of ETC International, and we're a local company here in Virginia Beach, even younger, although we just crossed 10 years, I think, on Sunday, officially, but that's 10 years from like becoming an idea on a napkin, far from our first contract. So we actually started off as a training company, and that's what we did exclusively through about 2019. I had been a naval officer, and my final command was one that did about 80% of the Navy's overseas training for partner nations. Fell in love with that mission. It was a blast. So that command was called Expeditionary Training Command, ETC, hence ETC International. We kept it pretty direct. So we work in what's called the security cooperation community, and that's anytime we do anything with a partner nation is DoD. Well, 2019 came around, and we started to become aware of the Air Force AFWERX program and what they were doing with the open topic SBIRs and STTRs, and that was how we got involved. And the great part about that open topic program that we found is I wasn't a technology company, but they did offer an opportunity to say, hey, do you see a problem in that maybe we don't know about? Well, having done the security cooperation mission for about a decade at that point, I said, I've got some ideas. And probably some luck involved, but we did end up winning a phase 1 award on our first idea to essentially start working with security cooperation folks on the ground. And that turned into a phase 2, and it allowed us to start to get into the Air Force community and really build some wonderful relationships, customer and friends and whatnot. Because again, I was coming from the Navy, so this was all new. But we've had a blast with it. We've won, I think, 2 phase 1s that have both gone on to phase 2s, and the initial technology has gone into we're currently on a phase 3 and standing up, same thing, going through assisted acquisition through GSA, standing up another phase 3 right now. And absolutely agree, persistence, keep banging your head against the wall. Usual entrepreneurship, to be fair. And it's been a lot of fun, and it's been very, very rewarding to through technology be able to create relationships with the government customers and truly be able to innovate for them, particularly from the bottom up. A lot of times our customers are going, we've never had anybody actually come into us and want to solve something for us. It always comes from the top down. That'll be another challenge I'll address later. No doubt.
Yeah. Well, Chris, hold the mic, because that brings me to my first question, and I think you're the perfect company to start with it. So as a company that's new to SBIR and dealing with this type of contract with the government, what what are your recommendations to new companies that are new to dealing with this type of thing? Things to avoid, things to try, and then I'd like the other company representatives to talk about that too.
Absolutely. Fantastic question. So new government contractor or new working in the SBIR STTR
Well,
program?
most of the audience are companies, small companies that want to get in and get some funding, SBIR or STTR funding. So I think any wisdom you have is welcomed, but particularly that would be great.
So particularly with, again, I can speak to the AFWorks program with open topics. A lot of our success there involved knowing the customers and being able to address a problem that when you said it to that potential government customer, heads just started nodding, where they're going, yeah, that is a problem we have. Because that's you're in to really start that relationship and start to solve some problems.
Hey.
With an open topic,
Anybody come to me?
an exploratory contract, there's not actually a technology deliverable. It's basically to go in there and find preferably an Air Force customer that agrees that the solution you proposed solves a problem they actually have. And they're willing to sign a memorandum of understanding to allow you to go to propose a phase 2. Because in that program, you cannot propose a phase 2 without that signed customer. Again, it's evidence of an actual government need, because they don't want to just fund a technology that doesn't have that connected to it. Preferably more than one government customer saying, yes, I do have that problem. I'd like to see that prototype. So get out there and meet your customer, whoever you think it might be. And it might not be who you think it is, but get out there and start talking to folks, and they can then introduce you to other folks that maybe do have that problem or have that problem even more than they do. And just by doing that, you're going to start to build a base of support that you can start to grow from. And as new topics come up, you'll find new problems that you can potentially solve. So get out there, talk to the customers, create those relationships, and start to figure out what problems that are out there that you could potentially solve.
Yeah, and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, I think all the services are the same, in which to proceed to a phase 2 SBIR, you have to have some level of agreement from a government agency, whichever service it is. Don't they all do something like that?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
You know, that progression from a phase 1 to phase 2.
Yeah.
Who wants it? Why do they want it? Who's ready
Yeah.
to work it? So yes,
Yeah.
you know, that's part of the work at the phase 1 is working through those relationships and understanding. So you're not surprised when they go, well, I'm glad you put it in a phase 2, but since we didn't talk, you know, so bad for your weekends.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, great. Kevin, do you have anything to add from that, from the perspective from G2 Ops?
Sure. I would echo everything that Chris said. I would add that I think our entree into the SBIR community was somewhat unique in the sense that in 2018, we were an established company. You know, we had competed for and won prime contracts. So we had multiple facility clearances. We had gone through audits. You know, we had cleared staff. We understood how to invoice the government. We understood how to troubleshoot problems with invoicing the government. So these sounds like trivial tasks, but that foundation was set. And so the way we looked at a new topic to bid on was probably different maybe than that 1 or 2 person company. And so my suggestion from that standpoint is that product market fit, I think the way maybe the Navy and the Air Force think about that product market fit is differently than the way we do in industry. So it starts when that first topic write-off during the pre-solicitation time comes off the printer. I'm already thinking about long-term, 10 years from now, product market fit. So do I understand the technology? Do I understand the gap? Do I understand where they want that technology to go? Do I understand the integration environment, the platform, the end solution? And if I don't understand those things, can I get them from the TPOC? Can I get those things from the topic author? Can they answer those questions? And the bottom line is, if they can't, if they don't have that same vision, maybe we're not a good fit for each other. You know, that product market fit, you know, we're looking at that immediately right away, because the bottom line is I might be able to solve that problem. I might have the technology, you know, a TRL 1 or 2 level capability that I can take to TRL 7 by the end of phase 2. But if I don't understand the domain, the end platform, the customer, the command, the training culture, the sustainment process, I might not be the best fit, you know, for that. So I would say that might think about that stuff right away. Ask those questions early in that engagement, you know, with your TPOC for any topic that you're looking hard at.
Excellent. Thanks, Elon.
Yeah, I would echo what Kevin said about, you know, really trying to develop domain expertise in an area. I think as, you know, engineers, technologists, like, you know, sometimes you can see the list of topics being published and you feel like a kid in a candy store, being like, oh, there's all these interesting things I can go after and these hard problems I'd love to work on. And, you know, you can find yourself, you know, bidding things in training and, you know, across a wide variety of different operational use cases, even though they may have, similar technology. You're using machine learning or data science techniques. And you can write successful proposals, but if you spread yourself too thin, you're never going to really develop the domain expertise in a particular area, develop the relationships and then a particular command to then really go to those future phases. So I think there's obviously a balance that needs to be struck there, because you do kind of always want to hunt while you're also farming. But it's important to not spread yourself too thin and really find the areas where you can develop the domain expertise.
Excellent. Do we have any questions in the room now or online that we want to address? Or I've got like 5 more that I've thought of when they're talking, and I'm not trying to get an SBIR. So I imagine all of you that actually want the government's money probably have some questions. Anybody? All right, well, then I'll ask another one. So as you were talking, you all kind of mentioned this, and I'm sure as leaders in your company, you're just always going to say the positive, best things ever. But if you had to point out the biggest challenges in trying to get this type of funding, what would you say from each company's perspective has been the biggest challenge in getting funding like this?
So it's definitely gotten more competitive, I think, in recent years. And I do think the program, as Bob and others have, and the other services had mentioned, the earlier requirements to find transition partners has certainly made it, raise the bar on going from phase 1 to phase 2 in terms of finding those transition partners earlier. But again, I mean, the challenge really is transition, right? I mean, because particularly again with when you're focusing on topics that are more science and technology oriented, where there's not direct applicability for some futuristic concept to something that's right here right now. I think the services have gotten better about matching up the topics with the needs, and so finding those opportunities has gotten easier, although as I mentioned, it's also more competitive, so it's kind of you have both sides there. Yeah, I would say that's probably been the biggest hurdle.
Yeah,
Excellent. Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you. Let's see, I concur with all of that. I would say the kind of to build on what I said earlier, the TPOCs, the authors have got to be thinking about that full life cycle. They need to think about that full 10-year, 15-year, 20-year life cycle of the gap that they've identified. How are they going to take the solution they get and transition that out into the world, into their platform, into their environment? And we find that is not universally true. All TPOCs are not thinking about this the same way. They're not thinking about the long term that way. And so we might have a great phase 1 successful engagement. In fact, we partnered with Perceptronics some years ago, and I thought was fantastic engagement with the customer, came up with a really interesting, innovative solution, but we didn't make the connection because they didn't understand what their next step was. They hadn't thought about how they were going to integrate that technology into the program of record. And so that, to me, that's been a barrier to success. I think the phase 1s that we've not had go to phase 2, or the phase 1s where maybe we didn't connect and get an initial award, were based, in my assessment, primarily on that issue, the lack of that kind of connection.
Also concur on a bunch of that, particularly you mentioned sort of the magic word program of record. I'm sure that's sort of the opposite of the challenge I found. I mentioned that when we first started partnering with the government on SBIR and STTRs, we were coming in the ground level, so operational squadrons with the Air Force. Great news about that is they are thrilled to hear about the free money, quote unquote free money, that you can bring in from the SBIR program to solve their problems. Problem is they have no idea what a program of record is and have no business, and they know it, they have no business being the one that sustains any level of technology down at that warfighter level. So that was certainly one of the biggest challenges that we had to overcome at first. And we're still working on overcoming it, but it was realizing that, okay, we've got a lot of enthusiasm down here, just no idea how to fund this on the long term. So again, it's just starting to build those relationships of, you realize you have a problem, start to build relationships, figure out who the vertical stakeholders are, and you're going to start to get closer and closer to where the money is. And if you don't go into it blind, that also helps. We did that blind and had to figure it out. But if you know that from the beginning, really, if you're going to go into a phase 1, know that you're going into a phase one and you're going to be talking about phase 2 and 3 from day one, preferably pre-day one, with a customer, because your customer, whoever it is going to be, needs to know that, okay, we don't have the money, but we're going to partner with you to go find the money. And preferably that you've got that kind of relationship even before you have an MOU signed for going to a phase 2. You want to have that person, that government customer, be a champion for you to go find that that pot of money, or pots of money as it may be, that are going to be your sustaining funds for that technology, and to help it spin off into other different ways. Because without those government champions willing to go make some phone calls and open some doors for you, we dead-ended real quick. So that's definitely the challenge, is knowing that you need to find sustaining pots of money for that technology.
Excellent. Excellent. So we've got a question coming in from online now that Tina's going to ask.
Yeah, so great question asked by Justin online. So to our panel, is there one DoD agency that has been easier to work with during the process? Great question. And is there a model you've seen which you believe could be used across agencies to help industry? So I think that's getting down to, like, you know, is one easier to work with, maybe what that process was like that you liked, and that, you know, again, could be taken across all of the services. So,
And no pressure, but you do have several Navy people, civilians here, Doug, but answer it well. No, I'm just kidding. No, this is really good feedback for Bob Smith and all the people that run the SBIR programs, because one of my other questions is, what do we need to do to improve? Because the best thing that we can do of good stewards of government money is find the best, fastest, most efficient way to get good things into the hands of all of our warfighters. Bob has a follow-on question or statement to that. And then we'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Actually, my only comment is on behalf of the Army and the Air Force, absolutely, the truth shall set us free. And trust me, we all look for other great models to copy. So if you want to say bad things about me, I'll leave the room if it makes it easier for you, but bring it on.
Well, there you go. Carte blanche. Say anything.
Well, that's great. We don't want you to leave the room. I want you to listen, and I appreciate you being here to do so. So I would say each of the services is, and federal agencies, not just the services. Again, SBIR and STTR throughout the federal government. I'll speak to the branches. Each branch has its own flavor, and they've done a very good job over the last few years of sort of creating this defense innovation community where they are trying to learn from each other. But that doesn't overcome the fact that they are individual services that have different ways of doing business. I think in terms of a framework, if you look at the SBIR and STTR process, going from a phase 1 to a phase 2, and every element that's involved in there, and then of course transitioning into phase 3, which it really needs to be the goal, there are lots of different elements in there, from the government customer to government contracting to award notification, and lots of different elements in it. And I would say the contracting part is the part where I see the biggest difference, at least between, I can only speak to Navy and Army, Navy and Air Force. Haven't worked with Army contracting yet. Hopefully we'll do that soon. But it's an education element that's involved with SBIR and STTR as well. A lot of times, unless the service has very much made an effort to go out and re-educate their core of contracting officers and contracting officer representatives, a lot of times there's an education element. You go, we want to do a SBIR phase 3. You want to do a what? Now that's gotten better over the last couple of years, but that's where having partners that know how to do a lot of this education and have done this a lot of time is very, very helpful. There are some in the room here that I know you'll hear about later. But that's been one of the biggest things. Is just, it would be great to have some level of contracting officers across the services and agencies know a little bit more about what the program is and what SBIR phase 3s in particular are. Because again, we're not going to be working with a lot of the regular contracting officers on 1s and 2s. Because when you transition to free, then you're suddenly out there in Gen Pop, if you will.
I can assure you, as a government civilian, I have the same frustrations.
I believe it.
Kevin, go ahead. What do you have to say?
Yeah, as usual, I concur with all those things. So I don't have any experience with the Army, but we have had, I would say, 3 channels experience. So Navy, we have traditional phase 1, phase 2, and a couple of phase 3s now. And that process, I think, has been very good. You know, I think we've made good connections with the TPOCs there at the beginning. We've made good choices, and we've done good enough work to continue. You know, I think that's the important part. And the Air Force is doing a lot of innovation. You know, we heard, about AFWorks and AF Ventures and their whole process. And some of that innovation is really interesting, but I'll tell a story about some of the pitfalls, I think. So, we were awarded one of the 50K phase ones, and then went out, did the work, and won, we're invited to a pitch day for a phase 2. And so we went to Dayton for this pitch day. And so again, this is 2019. So, my company's been around for 8 years. I have 70 people. I have a foundation back office. Like, we know kind of what we're doing most of the time. And so we give our pitch and we're waiting to find out if we win. And they had set up opportunities for us to have booths. And so the UPS guy lost our stuff for our booth. And so I didn't have a booth, but it gave me an opportunity to walk around and talk to everybody else. And I realized that everybody else there, if you added up all their companies together, was less than the size of my company. So one particular conversation I had with a gentleman, he had created an intubation kit, a tactical intubation kit for the Army. It was fantastic technology. And he asked me, he said, hey, that 50K they promised us today, if we get our award, is that true? I'm like, I think so. But it didn't matter as much to me as it did to him. And I said, well, why does it matter? He's like, well, Amex bill is due on Monday. I got to fly home. And so they're fundamentally different. Like, that channel had attracted a fundamentally different group of industry participants. And so we were the outlier in that case, which was somewhat unique. Everybody else was kind of in that boat. Or think about the Amex bill that was due on Monday. And so I think that innovation is really interesting. But again, the TPOC authors and the people that are going out and looking for the technology need to think about that part of industry that they're attracting and how they're going to support those people, as they go forward. So I didn't have that angst that day, but I could see it in all of them. And so I think the Air Force is doing a good thing with that innovation, but they probably need to think more about the support structure required, to continue that.
So having been doing SBIRs for
quite a while, I mean, I've certainly seen at different times, different agencies have been, easier, harder. Just it's varying. I wouldn't say there's one in particular that's usually the other, but I would say the biggest differentiator is really the TPOC. And kind of their attitude towards SBIR and the topic in general. And this is something you can kind of tease out if you engage the TPOC before you submit in that question and answer. I mean, get a sense, do they have a long-term vision for this topic, or is this just some idea they're kind of toying around with? Are they passionate about it? Get a sense of like how engaged they're going to be. It's always better to have a TPOC that's engaged. They may want to have weekly tag ups with you, which is, could be a lot of work, but in the end, that's going to be better than having a TPOC that's just kind of, reading the reports and not giving you feedback. And, so I think that's probably the biggest differentiator is selecting topics where you have a TPOC that's really going to be pushing for your success and see your success with the topic as their success as well.
So, can I ask a follow-on question, or is there anybody in the room that's got one? So several of you have talked about the importance of government engagement or a TPOC, technical point of contact, and how important that is, both in getting the first phase of a SBIRS STTR or certainly in transition. Do you find difficulty? Do you have any recommendations for some of the newer companies to this about how to identify the government people to talk to? How do you the most effective ways to reach out to those people so you actually get a call back?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hit or miss, I hate to say. I mean, sometimes you have, I've seen topic solicitations that don't even have a TPOC listed. So if there's a TPOC listed, so usually sometimes there's multiple, the approach is kind of blast, email everybody who's listed there. Sometimes you get a response right away, say, hey, I'd love to talk, give me a call tomorrow. And sometimes, it's radio silence. And then you get a response like, the last day where you can ask questions. So yeah, I mean, I think, just try to be proactive and use the email, call, whatever you can do. And if you get a response, you get a live one, then, definitely kind of pull that thread.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, so one of the reasons that the Tech Bridge Network and NavalX was stood up was to be the super connector between the non-traditional partners and the rest of the world that has, the government need, the government labs, and the non-traditional partners that might have a technology that we're not even aware of, and try to make that connection between naval need, and the other services have similar things. So the Navy's S&T gaps and needs, and who might be able to provide a technology solution to that. So if you're not sure who in a region you need to be talking to, there are 15 tech bridges or 14 tech bridges in the continental US that are much more accessible. And we don't have money per se, but we're all senior S&T types that can at least point you to the right people. So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I'd add is, you can also kind of find partners, maybe with bigger corporations that are working in this space who already have established relationships, and look to them and say, hey, you want to partner on this topic? We're a small business, we can prime it, and then see what relationships they have to go reach out to TPOCs and learn more.
Yeah.
I could concur with all that, and I think if you have the opportunity, if you have an existing relationship with a customer base, and they're thinking about using the SBIR STTR process, engage then. Use that time to help them maybe shape the topic so that they better zero in on what they need, whether you're going to be involved or not. Help those people shape, really shape what they want to do, and then use those relationships with the companies to help, get the intel you need to understand what's coming out. Bob mentioned the workshops they have where they kind of talk about, hey, here's where we're going in the future. These are the basic topic concepts that we're going to look at. Those things are all very helpful. The more information you can have going into, pre-release process, all the better. And then the one thing I would add on the TPOC engagement is, it is frustrating when you can't engage with the TPOC because they don't provide the information. That ought to not be allowed. It's so important that that's a down select for us. So put a topic into our pipeline. If I can't speak with them personally, then it just falls off the table. We don't engage. It's that important. And it might be something that's absolutely in our wheelhouse, 100% perfect. It looks like we can help them. I can objectively help them, but I didn't make that connection. And so I can't continue. It's just too much risk, in that case.
So I'll come at it a slightly different direction, because we haven't worked so much with specific topics, but again, with the open topics that have come out through AFWorks in the recent years. The technical point of contact TPOC process there is a little bit different, because there's no TPOC in terms of a government, your specific government customer in that phase one. Phase one is a 3-month, go forth and find somebody in the Air Force that agrees that you have a problem and be willing to state that in an MOU for a phase two. Well, that process right there is where the TPOC for your phase two becomes identified. And that is critically important, because that's who you're going to work with over the next however long it may be, 18, 24 months on a phase two, and it will hopefully be your champion to help push that into transition into a phase three. So I guess my advice on that one would be, once you find a government customer that is interested in a phase two, don't let them just randomly select who that TPOC is. It needs to be very thought out. It needs to be someone who is really going to be a partner to that company and be the one throat to choke, if you will, because especially if it's an operational unit, they're very busy. And if you're talking to 18 different people at the command, that's challenging for them, and it will be frustrating for you. So work with them to figure out who is the right TPOC for your effort over the next 18 months, so that it can be good for both of you, and it can provide you the flexibility you need during that phase two. And hopefully, again, that champion that's going to be from day one pushing to a phase three, so that there's no gap between your phase two and phase three efforts.
Excellent. We have a couple of questions there. Nick, why don't you start with her right in front of you? And if you could use the microphone, please, to ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you. So my question has to do with a comment, Chris, that you made, but it's really directed to anyone on the panel. And it has to do with some of the challenges with the contracting officers, and maybe the education piece about using the SBIR and using it as an acquisition path. And I'm just wondering, does anyone have maybe a success story where you've been able to get your customer, and probably more for in the phase three SBIRs, where you have this vehicle, you want to get other customers to use it, but because it is a little bit different and unique, what are some good tips to kind of let them know that, hey, this is a viable and very doable path, and efficient too?
Yeah, fantastic question. My short answer is make sure you have somebody or a partner that perhaps has done lots of phase threes and can make that contracting officer or contracting officer representative know that this is not too good to be true. Because if they don't know what this program is, that will be their first response is, that can't be legal. That's got to be too good to be true. And what eases their pain is oftentimes talking to another government civilian or active duty person who has done it before. And then all of a sudden you've got credibility. Now, if you're just getting to the program, you don't know who these people are. I partner with the folks from C5BDI who've done, I think 90 phase three actions, and can almost on a personality type match up, okay, this person needs to talk to this other government contracting officer who's done this 30 times, and they'll believe it. And not only believe it, but they'll be able to help walk them through the best practices, which after a couple of years, again, I speak only for the AFWorks program, there's a lot of lessons learned after just 3, 4, 5 years of doing this, and letting them not go blindly into it will save everybody a lot of pain. It'll be a better vehicle and benefit to the government, and it'll be an easier and more rewarding effort for you as a company.
I concur with all of that. The one thing I would add is be patient. So even the most knowledgeable acquisition professionals are going to have this question about phase 3. It sounds too good to be true. And honestly, our phase 3s are challenged, I would say, on an informal basis repeatedly, by organizations that look in and say, well, that can't be right. Why wasn't that competed? How come I didn't get a chance to influence that? So to be patient, arm them with the information they need to answer the questions, to justify, what's going on, but then also be prepared, do the research and be prepared to answer their questions. All kinds of questions go, well, do I have an interagency agreement? And does it matter? Has anybody written the 7600? A or B, does that matter? How do I MIPR money from one command to another? These questions all come up, and it's important to kind of do the research and arm yourself with all those kind of building block things that allow you to build a foundation to make the contract come to life and then be successful over time.
I mean, I would echo everything that I'm not sure a whole lot to add here, but I mean, certainly I've had the experience where, you talk to the contracting folks and say, hey, we want to make a phase 3 here, and it sounds so good to be true. Or, we have originally a phase 1, phase 2 from DARPA, and now the transition is with, say, the Navy, and, like, wait, can we do that? So there is that process of needing to kind of educate. And again, we work with C5BDI also on help us with that, and help navigate to kind of play the impartial role of, educating the contracting folks on how the process works, and that's been helpful for us.
Excellent, thanks. We have another question from the audience.
Yes, this one's going to pick on Elon just because we've covered a lot in terms of Navy, SBIR, and Air Force SBIR. So when it comes to Army SBIR, I know, Elon, you've got a lot of Army SBIRs. You've got some traditionals, and you also have participated in the XTech search that Dr. Willis was talking about earlier. So if you can just share some of the experiences with Army SBIR, as well as the differentiation between your experience with XTech versus traditional.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we've done AFWorks too versus traditional. So yeah, I mean, XTech is obviously is new. We've gone through a selection process on the program they had called multi-waveform SDR, and it's still kind of been an interesting process because the selection process is like a competition, right? So you do the initial pitch, then you make it to the next phase, you do the next pitch. So in this particular case, we were selected for a phase 2. And when we, the requirements for the phase 2 proposal were to, submit our certificate of selection and submit the slides from our last pitch. So that goes through the process and gets to the point where now it's time to issue a contract. Contracting guy looks at it and says, hey, where's the SAL? Because there was never really a formal proposal process there with the SAL. So then it was kind of going now to the, even though supposedly we've already kind of gone through the proposal process of now negotiating this out with the end customer, who is different from XTech because it's one of the PMs. XTech was kind of just managing the competition. So, I mean, again, I think a lot of these processes are new and being formulated. So there's certainly some growing pains here. I think we've had some similar experience with AFWorks and the pitch day as well, where the end customer who you work with is different than the folks who are making the selection process. But again, I think you just have to be patient and trust the process and trust that everybody has good intentions and work through these issues as they pop up.
It was a nice question, though, that brings a different perspective than we heard. So we have just a few minutes left before lunch. I'm trying to, part of my job is to keep everybody on schedule. So I just want to give each of you a couple minutes. If as we've been discussing things, if you have any other words of wisdom that you can share, that would be great. If you want to wrap up with about 2 minutes each, we'll go from there.
That's not fair. One thing we didn't talk about, I thought this might come up, was I'll just mention data rights, SBIR data rights. For even for an established company is a confusing topic. There's contradictions, in the FAR, the DFAR, and the policy guidance. But it's really important. So one of the benefits that the government is giving you is we're going to help you protect this technology. After you develop the solution, we're going to help you commercialize it. We're going to help you protect it. It's yours, and we want to do that for 20 years. So that's a big, it's one of the business decisions. One of the business reasons we go into that. We take this route, this channel into the government. It's really important. So, recommendation: take the time to understand what those things are. Ask counsel if you need help. Kind of deciphering how those are, and then label. Figure out how you're going to approach that at the beginning of your phase one right away, and then label things properly, and then capture your technology. Make sure that you're protecting that. You're taking advantage of the benefit the government is giving you. And I would also kind of, Alon mentioned the AFWERX process. So we'd also done the phase 2 pitch day piece. And it is a different group. It's a panel that makes that choice. And then you're kind of routed back to your customer. And so there's a dysfunctionality there. So that I think that AFWERX ought to think about, just in the sense that when you have a traditional topic where the TPOC authors it, they collaborate with potential offerers, they understand what solution they're looking for, they make the award, and they manage that award. Is different, in those AFWERX, ventures topics, and that we encountered that in a phase 2 we had, and it killed the topic. We did not move beyond phase 3 because we didn't make the right connection, and the reason was there was never a solution. We were never going to integrate the solution into the primes process, so it was an industry mismatch, that existed from the beginning. So just something, again, it goes back to kind of engage your TPOC, make sure you get that long history. Where are you going? Where are you going to be in 10 years? How do I help you get there? I think that's really important.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, so he touched on this a bit, and one of the other speakers earlier did. So there's a fine line between producing a proposal that has enough detail in it to be selected, and somebody that's in the selection, like Bob or some of the others, go, oh yes, that fills the gap, but not reveal your intellectual property, because once you put it out there, a lot of the stuff has to either be distro A or to get to a certain level, and your government folks can help with that. And that's one of those things where you shouldn't be afraid to ask them that. Ask the government, is this enough detail? Is this enough detail for you to make a decision? Because you have to be, we, the government, will protect your intellectual property, but once you start putting that proposal, that information's out there. And it's challenging to do once you are proceeding along, or getting out there and making presentations. Yeah. Did you have some follow on to that, Chris?
Well, I'll piggyback just a little bit. The data rights is a huge issue, and it's all part of go learn. Pick up the SBA policy directive. It's long, but the parts that are really, really, really relevant aren't all that long. And if you know them, you can point your customers and contracting partners to exactly where it is. So if you hear something that's wrong, you can go, well, hold on, let's open up the policy directive and look in here. And that may not work, but at least you'll know what is right and what isn't right. And it helps in the education process. But knowing that back to front also lets you get really creative too. Because one of the reasons that DoD likes phase 3s so much is because that policy directive gives it an incredible amount of flexibility. It's a powerful, powerful tool for the government. And it all draws from that policy directive. So get in there and learn. Don't be afraid to ask questions. There's lots of, there's lots of events like this on SBIR and STTR, and you'll find information out there that might be a couple years old. So always make sure it's up to date. But you can learn about data rights in depth for some really smart people from events like this and from previous events where there's still material. So go learn.
Yeah, I mean, data rights is definitely a challenge, particularly around software programs.
If you're selling if you develop a hardware product on SBIR, and then you're producing these things and selling them as individual units, right? It's very clear what you're selling. But when it comes to software, it's a little fuzzier, because SBIR data rights says the government has unlimited rights, right? But you're building software, which is just code. And then a lot of times on programs now, the government doesn't want proprietary software. They want to have everything be open. So when you go to then embed your software in some other program, the prime is going to say, well, what data rights are you asserting? And you say, oh, well, I'm going to assert SBIR data rights. And they say, whoa, that's a no-go, because that implies, you're asserting something proprietary. So I feel like, that is a challenge that I think that there still needs to be some, maybe it's evolving, but there's some lack of clarity there in terms of how to navigate that we've encountered. I've actually had a situation where it was a software product, and dealing with the customer, and they were almost saying, well, if you're going to charge us per unit on this software, then we don't want to do this contract. So I mean, I'm saying, well, we're just following what's in the SBIR law that was approved by Congress. I mean, that's a little bit of an untenable position if you're going to penalize us for following the government's own rules. But there is a lot of ambiguity there and nuances that I think can be a challenge to navigate.
Yeah. So I had the schedule wrong. So guess what? We do have a few more minutes left, and we have a couple questions. So those were great words of wisdom. Now you have an opportunity for even more words of wisdom, because there's a couple more questions. So Tina?
Yeah, so this one actually from me to all of you guys. So the TPOC interaction, hugely important, but I want to even take it back a step further, or you talk to the TPOC. Talk to me about how your kind of proposal process, right? Because you got to write a winning proposal to get the SBIR. So kind of how that has evolved for you all as a company, and then where you think it's been most important. So, right, Bob mentioned, what you're proposing, who you're proposing is hugely important. And we know, even with AppWorks, like that defense mission need, you've got to tie all that in. So can you kind of speak to how your proposal process has evolved, and where you think what is most important, again, for a lot of startups in the company to really hone in on, which we can always tie back to the TPOC. So
yeah,
Elon, you got the mic.
I mean, proposal writing is sausage making, right? There's no other way to really put it. It's kind of always a chaotic process. Now, but I mean, I think, just kind of to tackle it from a slightly different angle, I think for a company maturing, how do you educate kind of the next generation of proposal writers, because it is kind of a fine art, and once you do it and you kind of get you learn how to do it, and you kind of develop your process. It's important for the longevity of your business to be able to train others to do that, and that's something that we're trying to sort of hone in and kind of finesse our process for how do we raise the next generation of proposal writers. But our process really starts with, do we have really an innovative idea, that addresses the challenge, that, where we're bringing in expertise based on either prior work or, some relationship we have that, we can add value in terms of leveraging some technology that maybe we know some other company has that isn't an SBIR player, that we can, license or bring in and add value on to deliver a solution. And then, once we really have the innovative idea, and kind of goes in parallel with that is really understanding the operational use case. So finding, a domain expert who understands this particular challenge and how it applies in a need that the service has, and kind of making that story coherent and blend. So I think that's kind of that's really the crux of where the proposal needs to kind of make a differentiation that shows, one, you really understand the problem you're solving. Two, you have a good technical solution that is novel and is actually realistic and viable. The rest of it, in terms of the SOW and the steps you're going to take in phase one. I mean, if you have those first parts right, those things should kind of write themselves. And then lastly, obviously the commercialization story, that can be a challenge too, particularly if you're working on something that is, very scientific or very nuanced or very specific, some electronic warfare thing that has, very specific military applicability. How are you going to then apply it in a non-commercial, in a non-DoD context? Sometimes you need to stretch a little there, but that's sort of how our process is.
Thank you, Elon. I'm reminded of an interview that I saw years and years ago. It was with, I think, the CFO of Nike. And the interview asked him, hey, when did you get to the point where cash flow wasn't an issue? And he said, never. We're not there. Cash flow is an issue. I think about it 5 times a day. And it didn't, you know, whether you're a lemonade stand or a multi-billion-dollar multinational corporation, cash flow is always a problem. You manage it all day, every day. Proposals are hard. They're always hard. And you know, I think you have a very sophisticated process. I feel very humbled by this. But I would put SBIR proposal development in the same category as OTA development. So a traditional, like say Seaport for Navy people contract, you're bidding on a services contract. So you're given a statement of work and you're returning a set of quals and experience in return for a set of dollars against a fixed variable hours or something like that. So for SBIRs and OTAs, you're generating a solution. So it requires creative engineering, creative energy, and that takes time. It takes your best people. And so we are often challenged by that. We down select very carefully to make sure that I can put the energy into that proposal that I need to. I can come up with that innovation. I can objectively think I'm adding value to solve this problem. It's always hard. I think our process is getting better. But again, it also goes back to, and you said it yourself, you know, that TPOC, we get each other or we don't. And if we don't, then I'm not continuing because I'm not going to be able to I'm not going to come up with the discriminators, the win themes, the innovation I need to really give that guy something to think about that's worth his or her time. So.
Awesome. I'll take it again from the slightly different angle of the open topic proposals. A little bit of a different process, but just it is ultimately still pumping out a proposal. So it's follow the instructions. But the biggest variable, I think, is what Tina mentioned was the defense mission needs. You have to stay relevant, and from cycle to cycle to cycle, what the government's interested in does change. You know, an example I'll give is, you know, I kind of work in a bit of a niche, which is security cooperation. I don't think the evaluators have any idea what that is. So a solution I put together for that community, I have to couch it in some sort of terms that shows the broader reach of that technology to touch the different defense mission needs or Air Force priorities or whatever customer it might be. It has to stay relevant to them and has to be couched in a language that they're going to go, yes, this is what I'm looking for, and it does have broad use. So yeah, niche versus attaching to broader needs that they're going to find interesting.
Interesting. Looks like Bob's got the mic and also has clever things to say. So Bob Smith from O&R.
That feeds into it. So one of the things I've heard from all of you is congratulations. You've all done fantastic work in the SBIR program. But you're essentially mature companies. You've gone through your years of stumbling and in the desert by yourself. And either have the answers now or know the people that have the answers. But Kevin, I'll pick on you first and have you answer first. You had a really strong point I like is having the strength and knowledge to walk away. So do you have a rule book there, or is it a spider sense to go, you know, I love this technology, but it's just not going to work in this case for usually not tech development, but it's the person, the process, the program, the bureaucracy. How do you know when to walk away?
That's a great question. Thank you. It's hard. That part's always hard. I would say we think about SBIRs in there's dozens of use cases, but I think of them
It's
as
more like technology.
you either have a product,
It's like the innovative research.
and you're pushing it into the DoD world. You're taking COTS and making it GOTS, or there's no solution whatsoever. There's TRL 1 or 2, capability out there, and they're truly looking for, ConOps requirements, capability definitions, software, hardware, the whole bit. And so first we make sure we understand the use cases. Basically one of those two things. If I understand that, then I look at the connection we made with the TPOC, and I say, okay, I understand what his problem is. I think I understand how I might fit. I think I understand other folks in the market and how they might fit. I think that's a big part of it, is that kind of pure market analysis. And if I get past that, then I'll say, okay, do I have the people on staff, that I can commit to this? If I write this proposal, I'm committing to this. I want those people to be available, and I have the engineering talent and acumen to go make this work for the long term. And if I can't answer all those questions, that's when we walk away. It's a really good question.
So I have a quick follow-on to that, and you can address it as you're talking to Elon. So in terms of, again, making questions about resources for any size company, apply for a SBIR, apply for an STTR. There's also a lot of opportunities now to demonstrate technology, and nobody's at the end of a demonstration at Antics or anything else with a checkbook going, that's the best thing ever. That solves all our problems. Now here's a pot of money. It still takes time to get to that next step. So as a smaller company or the bigger company, how are you making those decisions, weighing in?
Yeah, so I mean, the resourcing question is definitely a challenge. I mean, as the walk away question, and sometimes it's not always obvious the walk away question, because a lot of times, you know, we'll even start writing a proposal and then kind of realize we need to punt because this just isn't taking form and at the quality we want, or we don't understand, or as we're writing it, more questions arise than that we have answers to, that we feel we can address competently. I wouldn't say that happens a lot, but it does happen. But I'll agree with Kevin. You know, the basic, you know, questions we want to answer when we want to go after a topic is, you know, do we understand the use case? I mean, do we actually have something novel and innovative to offer here that's not just, you know, taking some COTS capability and tweaking it. Again, do we have the resources to do it? But in terms of you know, how do we then, when we're working on the phase one, or, you know, how do we figure out how we want to resource it? I think, you know, we always try to do a little more. You know, I mean, phase one typically is a feasibility study. You know, there's not a whole lot of money there to go off and build demos and things like that. But we try to, when we can, at least have some sort of something we can show that's more than just, you know, slideware or a report. And that does factor into our selection process. You know, do we have some existing capability that we can build on? I mean, over time, I think the cost of labor has gone up a lot more than the SBIR award dollar values. So, you know, I mean, I remember years ago, $100,000 award bought you a lot more engineer hours than it does today, particularly in the DC area and the current market. So, you know, we were able to do more, but at the same time, now we also have, you know, a more mature base of capability that we can build on. So to some extent it evens out. So I'm kind of rambling here, but hopefully I'm addressing the points you wanted to get.
Yes, definitely.
There's another criteria too, actually, Bob, that I didn't mention earlier, and it goes to your question, Dr. Sark. So there's the value of debts. Like this is we call it the pre-phase one value. That's what we call it, which is where I'm investing money. I have a cost of labor, proposals are free. I'm taking my best people and I'm innovating. I'm coming up with a concept. I hope somebody, you know, that fits the need. Another way to look at it is, as an organization, you know, we prize innovation, you know, but to say you prize innovation, to actually do something about it are different things. And so we do lots of different things in the company, you know, to kind of foment innovation and creativity. But one of those things is we tilt at the SBIR windmill. We do that for that reason. And so if we try to include as wide a swath of people as we can in the development of those solutions, and we'll try to take pockets of innovation and bring them together, integrate them into something that we can push forward to answer a TPOC's problem. And that you're kind of sprinkling innovation around the company, that has value. So even if I don't win every time, I've accomplished that. You know, the workforce knows that we tried, and the creativity that they had mattered. You know, and so that investment makes a lot of sense to us, and that's one of the ways that we think about it.
I think in terms of the resources for us, one thing, I guess the nugget I'll add here is, when we were first getting into these programs, it was a whole lot more resource constrained. And what changed was, again, you've heard me harp on finding that government champion and creating customers that are, you know, real partners. Well, once you've done that, now you have the ability to grow that customer, work new topics with that customer, create new technologies with that customer. Maybe you're not the prime, but maybe you can find a technology partner to bring in and continue to solve their problems you start to become a domain expert as you start to serve your customers. So in that sense, it started to become less resource constraining to go after these, you know, new topics, because we already had buy-in. We'd already done essentially a lot of work with, again, speaking in AFWERX terms, what you might do in a phase one. We already had a lot of that done because of existing relationships. So that helps with the resource issue.
Okay, we have one more question.
This afternoon, we're getting into STTR, Small Business Technology Transfer, and we're hearing from the from ODU. So we're hearing kind of from the university side. So I'd love to take a couple minutes and kind of, get your experience with it and, how that worked, how you found them, kind of how that work share worked. And I know you talked about data rights, like that allocation of rights and how you protect your IP, how they protect their IP, and how, as Bob mentioned, I think it's more companies should be looking at STTRs. But there's like, well, not quite sure how to go about it and how, it works. So I love kind of your perspective on all facets of finding them, working together, and kind of how you do that work share piece. Please.
So I'll take this at the level 1 and let you gentlemen elevate from there. So we've gone after one STTR where we got a phase 1. We partnered with a university that, again, if you're just getting into STTR, when you hear research institute or university that you have to partner with, if we're in industry, a lot of times we go, I graduated a while ago. I got nothing here. That's where partnering comes in handy. Because again, there's a whole bunch of folks that work with STTR, and the universities actually have STTR departments, really. I don't mean a department, but groups of folks that specifically work STTR. And not all universities are the same, and not all STTR groups are the same. So you probably want to find one that knows at least vaguely the area that you're going to go into with STTR. I was looking for somebody who was going in, we're going into Air Force again in a particular technology area, and we were able to get partnered up with a perfect university partner that's been a tremendous blessing to us. It may feel painful, like you're paying a tax with your work share if you're coming at it from a certain perspective. But if you really find a partner that is adding value to you and opening doors for you and helping you start working phase 3 from the very beginning, that's not a tax. That's a value add partner that is indispensable. We've lost STTR proposals and still continue to work with our forward. So that's level 1. I'll let you guys take it to level 2 here.
I'm not sure I can go to level 2. This is not a happy story. So we've written 2 STTR. We responded to 2 STTRs, and I felt like we made good connections, both with the topic author and our research organization. In both cases, they were not successful. But to get to, and so we haven't been going after STTRs for a while. We've just not looked at them. One of the reasons, actually, a point that Elon made earlier, which is that the engineering dollar now has gotten very expensive. So when you look at a phase 1 award, $150K in the Air Force, $250K in the Navy, it doesn't go as far as it used to. When you have to slice up the pie, you're compromising your ability to deliver on the innovation. That's really the bottom line. And so I think the STTR structure has a ton of value, and I know you use it successfully. But the economics are making it more challenging. And so that's maybe a structural deficiency that, the Navy might need to address.
Yeah, so we've done a number of STTRs. As far as we have a group of academics who we've sort of gotten to know over the years and done repeated work with them. Certainly there's certain challenges there. A lot of times, universities are, in addition to the data rights issue, they're very sensitive about publishing, right? And there's always a clause in the contract about how any publications need to go through a public release formal process, and they oftentimes will always, not oftentimes, pretty much always, in our experience, have pushed back on that clause. So we always had to kind of, figure out some kind of compromise there with the contracting officers. And a lot of times we've also had universities that where, because of grad student limitations, particularly engineering, you have a lot of foreign grad students, and so obviously that puts restrictions. So I would say the STTRs are there's certainly a lot of more complications there in terms of how do you put together a successful program from the just the dollar value, the staffing, the meeting the universities constraints. Just kind of an interesting example. We're working with a university where they didn't like the idea of having a defense focused use case. Very liberal university. So we had to it has to do with UAVs and surveillance. So we had to spin the use case to be not about, tracking bad things, but about how do you, track animals in Africa prevent them from being poached, right? So you can think of some similar problems in the DoD domain that might be similar to something like that, where you have a vast open area and, certain small objects that,
relative to the size that you want to track. And that worked. And actually our PM at DARPA really liked that.
Yeah. Oh, we love dual use technology descriptions.
So that was pretty interesting. But certainly we value the STTR program, and I think we've definitely gotten good value from our university partners. But SBIR is certainly a lot easier to put together a program.
Okay. So are there any other questions in the room? If not, I think we're going to wrap up. And thank you very much to Chris, Kevin, and Elon. This was a really useful discussion, I think, to everybody. And we're going to break here.
Thanks for having me. I'm Andrew Maximovich from Amazon Web Services. Really pleased to be here for the second time in a few months, I think. So Julie, thanks for extending the invite again. So a quick background on me. I've spent the past 9 years working with the Navy and other DoD customers to help them figure out how to adopt cloud services in support of their missions. The past 2 years in particular, I've spent working predominantly with the naval research community, and by extension to include contractors, nonprofits, universities, and other organizations that support the naval research initiatives, and likewise helping them inject cloud into some of the things that they're building for the Navy. And before I get into slides and what we do for small businesses in particular, I want to talk about a few projects that I worked on over the past couple of years that to me kind of help provide an example of what the cloud is capable of in the context of the Navy mission. And then I'll explain kind of why I'm bringing up these projects and how it relates to the folks in the room here. So a few of the things that we worked on the past few years, there was one project in particular where we participated in an ONR sponsored hackathon called Hack the Machine. Some people here are probably very familiar with that. And we used reinforcement learning, which is a branch of machine learning, to create a model that could support the Navy and JIATF South in performing counter drug interdiction missions in the Gulf of Mexico. And they could ingest all source data in terms of environmental conditions and past behaviors of certain elements in that area, and be able to model future behaviors so they could allocate, manned vessels like Coast Guard or law enforcement ships or unmanned vehicles in the most optimal way to, basically allocate scarce resources across the whole theater and be able to perform the mission as best as possible. That was one really cool thing we worked on the past year. There was another project where we supported Naval Surface Warfare Center at Carderock, and we've been helping them build an environment where they can take their data scientists who are in Carderock, Maryland, or Puget Sound on the West Coast, and have them collaborate in a single shared development environment on petabyte scale ocean acoustic data sets, which typically are kind of high gravity bound to specific locations like test ranges in the Bahamas, where you got to fly folks in, which during COVID was really hard to do. And so trying to create a cloud-based development environment where they could build better, anti-submarine warfare capabilities or acoustic sensing models based on these massive data sets using more advanced tooling. And there was a third project that was near and dear to my heart, where we worked with a METOC organization on creating a fully automated workflow to collect, process, analyze, and transfer to the high side and then disseminate METOC data to intelligence community entities who could use that data in support of certain missions they were performing. And what was cool about that was that the METOC operational command that was responsible for that had a much more compressed time horizon of data they could actually provide to those same performers, because they were out of NetApp storage on their premises, whereas in this context, we were able to take a much broader time horizon of METOC data and share it to these operational entities in the IC, because we had no storage constraints in the cloud. These were 3 projects that I supported in the past couple of years working with the NRE, and I bring them up because they have 2 things in common. One, each of those projects was driven by a small business with some support from AWS on the back end. But this wasn't us building capabilities for the Navy. These were small business driven initiatives, companies that understood the Navy's unique challenges, US technology, and just found a sweet spot to apply that tech to solve a difficult problem. And the second thing these projects had in common was that the architectures that were implemented weren't especially complex. Not a heavy lift, not a very advanced technology application requiring, you know, a decade of cloud experience to put together. It's more the cloud capabilities themselves are so differentiated from a traditional virtualized data center and pretty powerful on their own that in a customer segment like the Navy, where this tech hasn't proliferated all that widely yet, it doesn't take the most advanced application to build a capability that can really be impactful. And so the reason I bring up these projects and the fact that they were small business driven is that if there are small businesses in the room here or listening on Zoom or friends of yours in the community who want to use cloud services to build potentially really impactful, innovative capabilities to support the Navy, there is a huge team of AWS folks beyond me, not just in the direct Navy sales organization or our partner sales organization or subject matter experts in different technologies. We're here to help you do that. And so I have a few slides I want to share that basically will talk about what is it we can do to help small businesses in this community use the cloud, who may not have a ton of cloud skills to begin with, but recognize the potential and want to harness that technology to better support their customer. And so I'm going to cycle through some slides and basically what exactly are we offering in terms of support to help you do just that. So Tina, if you could move on to the first slide here. No. Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. Yes, happy to send it out. I understand. Nothing classified or confidential here. This is stuff we're more than happy to talk about to anybody. So yeah, and if you could just PDF it, if you want to send it out, that would be great. So just a quick eye chart of what exactly is the cloud offering if folks aren't super familiar. And at this point, from when I started, we were 40 services, and now there's something like 250. So I can't really summarize that or encapsulate that in one sentence, but we're running the gamut from multiple compute paradigms, traditional instances, to containers, to serverless computing architectures, basically limitlessly scalable storage. Under the analytics space here, we have some of the trendier managed service portfolios around machine learning and streaming data collection and business intelligence. And then a really high speed, high performant network enabling inter-region or internodal data transfers and kind of high performance computing contexts. So there's a lot in the platform, and this is kind of just a snapshot of what we're offering. And Tina, if you could go to the next slide. Where is it? Is a great question. And the answer obviously is all over the place, but if we're going to restrict ourselves to CONUS, there are 6 regional clusters of Amazon's data center infrastructure. 3 on the East Coast and Midwest. So there's our US East region in Northern Virginia, and then a commercial and government specific region in the Midwest. And then on the West Coast, we have commercial regions in Oregon and Northern California, and a second government specific region in Oregon as well. 6 places that are fully isolated that you can choose to develop infrastructure in. And from a security standpoint, if you're working on it's a pure basic or applied research project with no DoD CUI type of data, you can choose any one of those 6 regions. If you're doing more sensitive work that involves FOUO, CUI type data, it's unclassified, you can use our 2 government regions, noted US East and US West GovCloud. So options of where all the services from the last slide are deployed in these physical locations for you to choose from. And then Tina, next slide, please. Going beyond just the unclass realm and CUI, we do have multiple regions that support work being done at the secret and TSSCI levels. So we have small business partners actually that we've onboarded into the secret region who can directly connect via SD-RAN or SIPRNet via customer site or their offsite classified enclave at their facility to do development work using classified data at the secret level. And then we have mechanisms to help small businesses partner with IC customers or military intelligence customers who are doing development work on the TSSCI domain as well. These are located, I'll save that for another discussion, but also 3 CONUS regions supporting classified infrastructure. Next slide, please. Another benefit to small businesses is in terms of getting started and covering your bases from a security and compliance standpoint. So AWS adheres to a laundry list of compliance standards that we're constantly audited against, which means when you use the cloud versus, let's say, building infrastructure in a development lab from scratch, you're inheriting well in excess of 100 DoD-specific security controls that factor into getting a compliance accreditation or an ATO, which helps you skip past a lot of the things you'd otherwise be responsible for that we bear the burden of. Tina, next slide, please. So that's kind of a quick recap of what is the cloud and what are we offering. Now the question is, how do we help small businesses take advantage of that, which I think is what we're really here to talk about. And the first 3 bullets on the right are what I want to focus on. We work closely and have teams dedicated to helping small businesses by investing our time, investing money in the form of credits to offset the usage charges associated with AWS infrastructure, and sharing knowledge and experience to help these projects turn out successful. And obviously lots of other fringe benefits as well. I'm going to drill into each of these 3 things a little bit more over the next few slides. Tina, please. And in terms of investing knowledge and experience, the left-hand column here on helping startup customers grow from a technical standpoint is where we really focus. I'll give a few examples of engagement models related to the last few projects I've done. In one specific instance, the hack the machine example, we provided a couple subject matter experts with deep machine learning experience to help a small business partner build an architecture that was kind of the most optimal use of AWS services. Probably could have been billables, like labor costs from a professional services consulting standpoint. Instead, we chose to invest that time because we felt they were building a really cool transformative capability that could really help the Navy quite a bit. We chose to invest that time and not charge for any sort of support, nor have we charged them for any support going forward to help them actually productize the capability, which they're now looking to do following the results of the Hack the Machine event. In another instance, I have worked with small business partners to personally help them write proposal content to help communicate what exactly is the cloud delivering in this particular project. What is a differentiated capability? What is the benefit? What is any sort of risk or risk mitigation tied to security and compliance? So that we have obviously libraries of proposal content around this sort of stuff so that we don't have to have partners trying to build it all from scratch. So whether it's proposal support, consulting support, kind of earlier stage architecture design and implementation support, or getting access to our product teams to understand what is on the roadmap for certain services they might be interested in deploying as part of their architecture. These are all things that we can do to help startups take advantage of the technology and do so in the most optimal way. Tina, next slide, please. In addition to just some of the ways that we engage with partners, and whether they're product companies or small niche systems integrators or developers, we also operate a laundry of programs that are more structured engagements that convey very specific benefits to partners who want to build capabilities for the Navy using the AWS platform. And if I pick on a few of these, Cloud Credits program on the right, we obviously talked about that a bit. A substantial, not a cash investment per se, but an equivalent from a small business standpoint, if they're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars just on running the meter on cloud consumption to a proof of concept or a demo, that's a lot of capital that gets tied up in kind of unrecoverable infrastructure costs for a demo standpoint. We can cover that for businesses who participate in these programs. Kind of similar with the POC program. And oftentimes in the POC programs, we will actually insert SMEs from an architect standpoint or a product manager or a consultant to help build the service that the partner wants to demo from the customer. Well-architected reviews, partner programs, again, these are all programs that convey these specific benefits to help partners that want to build an innovative capability for a government customer that showcases the power of the AWS platform. We have a team specifically that's operating a startup incubator today. Otherwise, they would be here, and they apologize that they can't. That sort of functions as the umbrella organization for working with startups in public sector. So there is a startup team in the public sector organization of AWS that administers all these programs and can kind of be your single throat to choke for all these things and help you kind of rationalize through which of these it makes the most sense to participate in if you're choosing to go down this path. And then what I think is the last slide, Tina, kind of highlighting an example of that. So please.
Do you have those kind of teams all over the country that can help startups everywhere with people from other places than here?
Yeah. I want to say we exhausted hiring in DC area probably years ago, and we've got folks coast to coast and everywhere in between at this point. Was there another question? No. So yeah, we operate a number of acceleration programs. Again, this is all contained within our public sector organization. So small businesses, startups, and small developer integrator shops that want to focus on building solutions for space, healthcare, sustainability, or global defense can join a cohort on an annual basis and participate in these accelerators, which is kind of a lot of the benefits that I mentioned in earlier engagement models, but more condensed in this 4-week sprint to help them really get off the ground quickly and try and time it with a specific project they're working on for the Navy or DoD or elsewhere in government. So to kind of wrap up this kind of rapid fire presentation, there are lots of teams in AWS that exist solely to support startups and small businesses that want to build on behalf of the government. So I'd mentioned there is the startup team that administers the programs I've showed up here. There are partner managers that are assigned to be a dedicated relationship manager to small businesses and help them make sure they're navigating the AWS organization, which obviously is pretty big and can otherwise be a bit difficult to find your way through yourself, helping you advance through different partner programs and tiers. There are people in my position who interface directly with the government, but have an interest in bringing in innovative small businesses and collaborating with them and giving joint, kind of presenting a joint force in front of the government, teamed up between AWS and the partner. So for me specifically, I work directly with small businesses all the time when they're doing something for the METOC community or for ONR or Naval Research Labs, et cetera. So between the partner teams, the direct Navy sales organization, the startup program, and probably lots of other technical teams that get pulled in, these are all the resources that exist to help small businesses develop really cool, innovative solutions for the government using the AWS platform. And if there's anyone in the room here or listening on Zoom who'd like to learn more or has a project in mind they potentially think could benefit from utilizing some of these programs, we'd love to talk more about it. And you know, I'll be able to share my contact information and the slide deck with Tina, and she can disseminate that to the group.
So a little bit more about the sausage making, but more on the government to AWS relationship. And you were speaking about identifying opportunities and solicitations and things of that nature. What is that relationship like specifically for the Global Defense Accelerator, the relationships with the government partners? Is it you're in this, you are a representative from AWS are in the same space with that government partner, or is it some database that you guys are looking at? I'm just curious as to how that relationship works on the government to AWS side.
So I'm not sure that if I think about the relationship between the AWS account executives, and there's about 10 of us who work with the Navy, and our government counterparts, I think the Global Public Sector Accelerator or Global Defense Accelerator is not necessarily plugged into the middle of that relationship. It's more incumbent on me as the account executive to make sure that I'm pulling in elements of the Global Defense Accelerator, whether it's my colleagues who administer it or their partners who are participating, and then inserting them into the relationship I have with the government customer where it makes sense, and doing it more opportunistically. So I think if anything, you know, Rich Julian administers that accelerator. And let's say I have relationships with 24 O&R program managers, and I know each of their topic areas, their focus areas, what they're researching, what their budgets are. And I know that Rich's cohort includes 2 partners that have some niche special capability that this O&R PM would be really interested in learning about. And I know that they're building that capability with AWS, which obviously is in my interest to advance that. So it's on me to make that introduction, to facilitate those first discussions, and to enable the partner to be in a position where they might be able to bid on a research grant from O&R, or maybe put in a proposal for a phase 1 SBIR or something along those lines. So it's honestly on the AWS account team to broker those relationships between the incubator and our government contacts. The incubator themselves, or the acceleration program, they may be nurturing government contacts of their own. I can't personally speak to that, but I would think that they probably are aware of lots of different acquisition programs and methods that are being used, so they can introduce the partners as well. I hope that answers the question. Okay.
I think that's all.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks again for having us. And Tina will have my info, and happy to dialogue with anyone after this if there's any interest.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jerry Smith. Please don't make fun of the voice or the accent. I'm from Southwest Virginia. I know y'all Tidewater, Northern Virginia people. I would say I talk fast, but I just say listen faster and we'll all catch up together. And I tell you, Andrew, he ducked out on us quick. I was really wanting to get that first session after lunch because I get the sleepy session, but bear with me. Again, Jerry Smith. I'm a little bit about me before I get started into the MPP program. 24-year Army retired vet. I got you right there. It took me about 9 years after I retired to really associate myself and get my fins wet. But I used to always tell my first contracting job as a PM after retirement was with the Air Force. So I always tell them the Air Force and the Navy, I love them. They were like the Uber for us when we had to go places. So yeah, okay. People online, I'm sure I'm gonna catch some online flag. So I work for the Department of Navy's Office of Small Business Programs. I work in the office with the director, Mr. Jimmy Smith, the deputy director, Ms. Arvis Washington. My program manager is Christopher Parker. He's standing in acting on a 9-month rotation for Miss Mercedes Thurston. She is a regular MPP PM. We'll be coming back to the office next month. She's been on an executive rotation, and she also gave birth to a beautiful son. So about 3 months ago. So we'll welcome her back. I've been there about 2 years. I've done 4 contracting positions since I retired, an Air Force position, a DIA position, and I luckily fell into the Navy's. My company hired me to take over the Army at the Pentagon, and that fell through. So believe it or not, I found a great home at the Navy. I'm a little biased to it now because the 6 agencies under the DoD umbrella, I feel the Navy is the most diverse. And I have to be really honest, I know it's hard for us Army soldiers to accept that, but it is. Under the umbrella, we have the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, DIA, NGA, MDA, and a brand new one was DITRA, just picked up on board in January. Now, the great thing about the Navy is there are 10 major buying commands. All y'all know that? There were 10. So we have the ONR, we have NAVSUP, NAVC, NAVAIR, SSP. So the Mentor Protege program, my goal, and it'll be a little bit later on in the slide deck, is really to have a Mentor Protege agreement in all 10. When Mr. Smith brought me in, he says, what can we do better? How can we get great? And how can we utilize this DoD money to help my major buying command directors achieve their goals? And I believe the Mentor Protege program is the most underrated, underused DoD resource and vehicle that we have financially. So moving forward, it was a pilot program established by the NDAA in 831 in 1991. It's been on and off funded, but funded for about 85% of that time. And some of the DoD umbrella agencies, they use that as a crutch of why they haven't utilized it much. Some even in the Navy, but it is strong, it is here, and we're doing business. It was created to provide incentives for DoD contractors to assist small businesses, enhancing their capabilities and increasing their participation in government and commercial contracts. That's a basic scenario. It really goes from government to contractors to business. It's real simple. The MPP was reauthorized and used in the most recent NDAA for FY21, and it has been funded all the way through 30 September 24. It's already been proposed to be funded past that to 2026. The areas of development assistance are, and these are really important, knowledge-based services, manufacturing, and R&D. Those are three huge contributors to the warfighter, the DoD, and especially to the Department of Navy. New mentor Protege agreements for FY22 and FY24 through FY24 are currently being accepted. The Navy is very unique in a couple aspects. One is we do not have a BAA in place. We accept applications year round. Every other agency under the DoD umbrella will have a BAA and have 2 solicitation acceptance times for white papers. We take them all year round because if company X here is partnered with major prime here, and that work and that gap needs to be filled, why wait? Let's fill it. Okay, let's help the warfighter. The Department of Navy has been participating since 1999, and since 1999, we've completed just over, that's a little bit old, just over 80 mentor Protege agreements. We are #1 in the DoD. Obviously, I tell people we have 10 major buying commands. We're like 10 agencies. We have 10 agency directors, major buying command directors, and we have a huge job. So we have 3 pending awards. We have 2 active agreements now, and well, agreements yield benefits to the warfighter, that's obvious. We have past successes include PPI. PPI was the creation of in-theater shipping containers. Have you all ever heard of those? Those are huge, the in-theater shipping containers. PPI created those. They owned the patent on them, came up with one of the major primes, and really was a major contributor for 36 months. And PPI stands alone now as a major prime who could fill that gap continuously for at least probably the next 10 years. They're a really great source. Another success story is Mills Marine, HM&E. They were big at NAVC. They've been all of our major ship ports, and well, Mills Marine's all over the country, but they have a great presence here in the Chesapeake Bay area. Well, something great for us now. We have a new approach. FY22, we secured our own Center of Excellence, and we're the first Department of Defense agency to have our own contracting shop. We no longer dovetail our mentor Protege agreements within another contract, or we thread them in. We have our own. We have standalone contracts. Some of the benefits, it reduces barriers for entry. When the application comes, once we get the funding from the DoD, we go straight to our contract shop and put the solicitation to them. It's easy. Reduce administrative burden and reduce on the fiscal burden. As y'all know, the government, they work really quick. I think we only have a couple in here, but they work really quick. It's a 24-hour turnaround most of the time. I did say I'm a contractor. And we're open for business. Ready to assist. Mr. Parker, and until he leaves next month, and Ms. Thurston and myself are available 24/7. My information will be at the end, and of course, I'll be here at the end if anyone has questions beyond the presentation. One of the goals of Mr. Smith, when he brought me in to support the MPP program on how we can get better, is we've had a few commands, 3 of them, that haven't had an MPA in over a decade. And with the current gaps and for the warfighter and the needs, especially in R&D, knowledge-based services, manufacturing, I'm not knocking manufacturing. It's a little bit easier for a prime to partner with a protege. You know, these primes will just, you name a prime, they've got a Rolodex of proteges, and that's great. It's great that they can bring them to the table, and if they have a past relationship within one of our major buying commands, they can really make a difference. And that way, at the end of that agreement, they can stand on their own as a solid prime and they can bid. And that's the goal of it. So when he asked me, he goes, how can we get better? I said, why don't we have an MPA in every command? You know, all our major buying commands, you know, they get their goals annually, and that's on DON money. This is DOD funded. You know, so there's an incentive for the major buying command directors right there. You know, all their tech teams, all their PMs underneath them, they're fully aware of the MPP program. We do road shows to go out there and continue that awareness to help them fill those gaps in their annual goals. So that's my goal. We've got 3 right now. A couple of them are challenging. If they don't fall within one of those 3 tenets, it is challenging, but it's not like it can't be done. You know, so we're out there. Who can participate and why? So the benefits to the DoD is to stimulate and transition innovative technologies into established DoD acquisition programs. That's my major buying commands. That's going all the way down to the nuts and bolts for the manufacturing places from NAVSUP and Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, all the way down to San Diego to the docks. Everything in there. To resolve operational challenges and other critical national security requirements, we go into ONR, we go into SSP. They have so many cyber and IT identified challenges and gaps that we can fill outside of the open source and the large primes. The small businesses have to be seen and heard, and that's another big reason I'm here. Provide developmental and technical assistance to provide Protege for potential business opportunities with the DoD and other federal agencies. Like I said before, at the end of the 24-month agreement, and it's proposed to go back to a 36. It was always before a base with 2 option years. Right now, currently until the end of 23, it's a base +1. However, questions in the room: how long can an agreement last with the DoD? There we go. So we know if it had to go, if it's a pertinent and very important agreement, it's going to be approved to go an extra past 1 option year. It's already been proposed in the new NDAA to go back to a base plus option 2, because sometimes small businesses and even the large primes, they don't want to get into agreement for 12 months or 24 months. You just can't attract that attention, and that's been brought up. We just completed our last Defense Business Board, and that question was raised, and I think that's going to be taken care of within this next NDAA. So the benefits to the mentors: develop long-term business relationships with the small disadvantaged businesses concerns. A lot of these mentors, the large primes and the mid primes, they have, I'm not going to say small relationships. Some of them have long relationships with one FTE or 2 FTEs on certain efforts, or maybe an ODC that's been addressed, but they can actually develop that long-term relationship, and they can really learn from each other. You'll be surprised what a large or midterm prime can learn from a small business again. All these CEOs and board members of the big ones, they started somewhere. So it's always good to get a refresher. To develop small disadvantaged business subcontracting base. That's one of the main goals when it was brought in 1991, to increase our base, to help to fill those gaps for the warfighter at all of our commands. And obviously teaming opportunities with the Protege. A lot of mid and large primes, they see it when they see out there, and they go to all these conventions, Sea, Air, and Space, and Gold Coast, and everything we promote. They see the small ones out there, and some of them really, they want to target that small business because they really want to bring them up. That way they can team with them for long term. Benefits to the Protege, which is almost, I could have put about 20 bullets on here, but I had to just be really short with them. Direct access to experienced contractors. That's probably the most valuable one that we say when we have our opening annual review and the kickoff meeting. We tell them, this is your foot's in the door now. Get an IV straight to that PM, straight to your tech, straight to the government, and learn from them. You're going to have your developmental tasks out there, and they're going to come and they're going to achieve those monthly through your executions. But you've got your foot in the door, just grab that experience. Teaming opportunities with mentor to win new contracts or subcontracts. So as that relationship goes throughout that 12, 24, 36 months, they're establishing that rapport. We know that in basic business. Before that 24 months up, that PM or that special programs program manager, mid, sub, or large prime, they've got that relationship established, and they're already identifying new efforts. somewhere else in the company that they can use that company as a sub or even have them prime. DoD long-term industrial-based partnership. Me supporting the DoD at the DON, that's preached every month to us. We meticulously track our partnerships for the industrial base, how many projected gaps we have, what may we not be able to fulfill next queue or 2 queues away. What are going to be our shortfalls, and how can we circumvent those? So strengthen that industrial base, that's a key part to success. The DON MPP impact. So our program has proven effective, directly supporting the warfighter, diversifying the Navy's supply chain. You hear that word, that's the big thing now since COVID is supply chain. But believe it or not, having the greatest small business options for the Navy makes the Navy the strongest. It really does. The more small businesses that we have out there bidding on primes, the better, the more diverse it has, the more opportunity for the taxpayer, for the Don, and for that small business. Creating successful small business prime contracts. That sort of speaks for itself, but it really is. Since I've been doing this for the Navy, 11 agreements, probably 7 or 8 for the DIA. I've only seen one fail, and it wasn't anything that the mentor, the prime, the midterm, or even the project could foresee. It was really COVID based, and it was just where they were located in the U.S. They were destitute out there, and we tried everything to actually infuse additional DoD money to keep that small business alive so they could recover. We really did everything we could. That's the only one I've seen in probably 6 years that didn't. So that's, keep having successful primes when they finish their agreement. It's imperative. So effective MPAs, which is mentor project agreements, have been recognized at the DoD level. The gold standard is the Nunn-Perry Award, which is an annual award. QED Mills Marine won 2018. We have another QED effort that's being proposed right now. We're past the funding level. We'll probably be an award level this Q with a totally different protege. Mills Marine was strictly on the docks doing business. This next one is an industrial-based small business, and they're doing big things on boats and planes. And it's amazing what a small business can do with such little technology, innovation, creativity, resources. And when you bring them with a mid or a large prime, it is so fun to watch them bloom into what they really dreamed of when they started that business. It really is. So the DON's MPP has far-reaching positive impacts. It wasn't QED, but another MPA that we just finished is now supporting 7 different acquisition programs. They are a huge success, and they actually probably have 3 more proposals out there. So they're super strong. Some of the 8As, the graduated 8As, they make great mentors as well. They've now reached into that mid-tier prime level after a graduated 8A, and they really, because they've started down here, they know what it takes, and they know they're very appreciative, and I think they're still hungry to teach what they've learned. Who can participate? So to be a mentor, is that a checklist I put up there? Wow. To be eligible for an award of a federal contract, yeah, that's sort of basic. To be qualified to provide assistance, and that goes beyond what the maybe a Gantt chart or another chart may say. We actually look at the whole encompassment of that prime. It could be a major prime out there in the market, but it may not be the best fit for the Navy or the DoD. So we are still selective. We don't go strictly just straight off of a ABC list. You got to be in good financial health and character, not on a debarred or a suspended list. They have to have evidence of capability to impart value on that protege. And we find that when they do our first initial, they do an information briefing with us, the PM, the assistant director, myself, the mentor, the protege, you can read people. All of us are in the room. We can read people, and you can tell whether they really have a valued interest in making that small business better, or are they just trying to, get a little money for some set aside. It's a no fee, no benefit to the mentor. So don't waste time. If you're not here for the protege and for the warfighter, we let them know right up front. So is it other than small entity that can be waived as well? Depends on the criteria of that mid or prime. And a prime contractor with an active subcontracting plan. It's also an 8A graduate with documentation of its ability to serve as a mentor. And the link on there will go back. I'll cover that in just a few minutes with the links. And we should go to the protege. To be a protege, the contractor must be eligible for award of federal contracts, must be in SAM, not be owned by an individual or an entity with stock options by the mentor and affiliated with the mentor, be at least one of the small business classes, small disadvantaged business, the woman-owned, the hub zone, service disabled veteran-owned, a business employing severely disabled, a business owned and controlled by the Native American tribe, business owned and controlled by the Native Hawaiian tribe, and an entity providing goods and service in the private sector critical to enhancing the DoD supplier base. We have 2 applications now that fall in that last category. There's a few extra hoops they have to jump through to get into that, but it's if they have been deemed that they can enhance that supplier base, we're all for it. We're all for it. And if they want to mentor, be a protege to a mentor, we're all for it. We support it. The types of MPAs. So there are 3 types of MPAs. Only one we deal with at the Department of Navy and at each of the other 6 agencies, and that's a reimbursable type. The credit and the hybrid types are handled by DCMA. They handle those exclusively, but the reimbursable types is a reimbursable agreements provide monetary the cost of developmental assistance incurred by the mentor firm and provided to a protege firm in accordance with their approved agreement. So like I said, no fees, no profit, not for the mentors. It's all about the DoD, the Department of Navy, the Major Buying Command, and the protege, the small business that's out there. The credit agreements allow for the mentor to receive credit towards subcontracting goals for costs incurred, and the hybrid is a hybrid of both the 1 year and then the option year. The one will be a credit and one will be a reimbursable, and that'll be discussed at the proposal. How to participate. The mentor application, the applicant submits the application package to the DoD review for approval. Upon approval, the applicant submits the agreement for review. The DON does the release of solicitation, or well, we don't do BAA, but they're trying to push us, but we're the only ones who don't. We do a straight application. The process is initiated by the mentor and the mentor selection of a protege. The mentor identifies the Major Buying Command for sponsorship. The mentor provides the white paper or initial documentation identifying the proposed agreement to the Major Buying Command and customer supported within that command. In an introductory briefing, stakeholders reach a tentative agreement and sponsorship is solidified by that command. Mentor, under the agreement submission, the mentor works with a protege to finalize their proposed submission, and a formal MPA is submitted to the DON OSBP for approval through the Major Buying Command Small Business Office for review, and they must hack off and endorse that. The contract process begins once the MPA is approved. Funds will be submitted to the COE, and standalone contract will be issued to the mentor. So it breaks it down. I like the way they did a little home bases on that. I thought that was creative. I didn't get y'all's attention. How to get started. So this link here, and feel free if you need to catch me afterward, is the DON guidebook link. And it's our SecNav Navy.mil. That's our Bible. Better explains the way I can verbally, but the mentors, the 2 key things about getting started, the mentors must choose a protege. The government does not facilitate teaming or partnering. We just cannot. That's under legislation and policy. There has to be an organic relationship that's made. You know, you see all the matchmaking events, and you got somebody that he can shoot the shot all day long, and if the mentor likes it, we just cannot facilitate that teaming of that partnership. The guidebook that outlines it is step by step, 34 pages. We just got it revised about a week ago. It goes step by step, form by form, with all the appendixes on how to's, why to's, and when to's. You can get connected to us anyway. Our PAO, she stays busy. We keep her popping. So She's if the LinkedIn. If you catch her on LinkedIn, don't catch it on Facebook. Hit her on an email and she'll owe you dinner. She's good. I mean, she's really good. I think the Twitter is her other thing too. But then we'll do also on YouTube. We'll do the weekly doing business with the Don. Mr. Smith, have you been a guest speaker on there? I thought I had saw you on there. I at least once. Mr. Smith is a big proponent of MPP. I know he's back there quiet, but he loves his SBIR sitters, so I can't say anything. But he's been on our podcast and our YouTube a few times at least. And that's the one, the other bald one. Is that the other bald one? Yeah, the director, Mr. Smith, is at OSBP. He's the one who's referring. Well, not related, believe it or not. So and points of contact, Mr. Parker until next month, and Miss Thurston will be coming back, and then myself at any time you can reach us. Email. There's actually a link on the website and my phone. Questions? Come on, who?
Just a couple of quick questions. First, is NavWar one of the?
They are.
They're already in there.
Yes, they are.
And then under the maintenance category, manufacturing category,
Manufacturing.
does maintenance and overall fall under that, or is that just not a part of the?
It's not. It's got to be one of the three tenants: the R&D, the KB, and then the manufacturing. It depends on the NAICS codes. If you got some questions, a CAPE statement or something with some NAICS codes on it, get with me and we can talk about, see where you qualify, see where you may fall in there. Cool.
Yes, quick question. So we've done several deals with a large mentor and we've never made it an official relationship, and we've really been targeting the SBA's mentor protege program. Is there an either or rule, or are you able to do both, or how does that work?
Great question. So there are three mentor protege programs. We obviously are the best. That's why I'm here. Do you know the difference between it? Well, I guess you didn't know there's three. So there's Department of Energy, Department of Defense, and the SBA. The Department of Energy and Department of Defense are very similar. DOE didn't come on till I think 99. SBA really focuses on venture capitalism and joint relations. That's their goal at the end of it. We do not. We'll do everything to keep that prime from eating a sub and eating the protege. That's the big thing I'm for. Is I look for when they come on with the introductory interview, at the end of the 24 months, they can stand alone. Thank you for your business, Mr. Mentor. You've got a whole lot more money. Stand alone now. Stand up on your own legs and let's get your sea legs going. That's really what I love to see, because at the end, most of the time, by the end of the agreement, that prime and the mentor and that protege, they're already plugging and playing. They're ready to go. They're grown. Whether it be a shortfalls in the accounting systems, their IT, their cyber challenges, the developmental tasks encompass the entire development of that protege. I get it. Cool.
Okay, so a couple questions from online. So Jerome asked, and I think you kind of answered at the end because I was actually going to ask a similar one. So how to sign up to be a protege? So I think maybe summarizing what you talked about, is it you already have to have that established relationship, or can a protege just come to you and be like, I need a mentor, which I think you just answered. So.
Well, I'll just elaborate a little bit. So Mr. Parker, Ms. Thurston, and I probably entertain 8 to 10, 12 protege conversations a week. Okay. They'll reach out to us. Hey, I want to get into the MPP program. Yeah. And we're talking about a company, an IT company that has a specialized niche. You know, they do something special with the screensaver. I don't know. They'll do something very special that can really, they've already done part of their research. Say, okay, I've identified there's a gap at NavAir and this right here in this space. I want to get into the program because I want to grow. And they've had a business model, business plan, a vision. They just need that extra help. Well, a lot of them they don't have that mentor with them, you know. And unfortunately, I'll give them the whole uptick and try to get them. You know, obviously they're motivated because they're reaching out, you know. But we can't do the teaming, but we can if any of the small businesses, or if you know any, that want to go down that path, I entertain them. I try to give them all the information and hopefully guide them into, a lot of times the small businesses online here and people in the classroom. What a good path I've seen is the mid primes and the big boys and that potential protege. Most of the time their business model and business plan at the core and the base are very similar. And those are the most successful ones. And maybe company X here, they sort of patent themselves after, you know, mid prime in a way when they started their business. Maybe they saw that successful. Now the big boys, they've also branched out and diversified and reclassified and made more companies within themselves. But to the base part of those companies, a lot of times they are parallel with their business vision. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, 2 more quick ones and then we have to move on.
Kick me
So
out.
if you're a large former WOSB, assuming you can be a mentor, it's kind of the question. And then, or, you know, she asked, or Chris asked, don't have to be a former 8A. So is that 8A a hard, must be a former 8A, or they're a former WOSB that is now a large? Could they be a mentor?
No, 8A is not a requirement.
Okay. Okay. All right. And then lastly, is there a list of current mentors on the OSBP website?
Wow, I get that every day. There is not a published, I see everybody smiling now. There is not a published list. The DoD is actually currently working on that. And in November, the DoD director had let us know, all the support people for the agencies, that there's going to be a matchmaking, unofficial matchmaking, I can't even say matchmaking, an event where mentors and other small businesses are allowed to all come in and learn about the Mentor Protege program. Fend for yourself. So, but that's been long awaiting. I get that question, believe it or not, multiple times a week. Is there a list? And because it makes it easy, which it seems like in all the small business aspects, SBIR, STTR, MPP, I mean, Small Business Administration, there's always that one little nuance. You're like, dang, I just need to get past this hump. And I think the DoD is trying to. That's a legislation thing in the FAR that just can't be changed. But it's going to try to be addressed in November, since it's been a major question since COVID. So